So good afternoon. My name is Melanie Turner. I'm the Director of Network Operations and Design at Complete College America. I am honored to be bringing you all our Digital Learning Success webinar series. This is the final part of this series for now. And I'm thrilled to have our presenter here today to discuss how to choose the right student success technology with student feedback on critical IT investments. So I would like to introduce Sarah Zauner. She's the Executive Director of the ADA Center and will be leading our conversation today. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Melanie. It's lovely to be here with you all virtually. I see some familiar names and it's a nice intimate group for a pretty interesting conversation this afternoon about some really rich insight we got from students in the last several months when we asked them, what are the technology capabilities and practices that are most impactful for your success and which ones can you do without? Before we get into some of that feedback and some candid discussion at the back end of this conversation, I wanted to give just a little bit of a synopsis of who we are before getting into the materials. So a quick bit about the ADA Center. We are a small niche organization that has a very specific mission to help access-focused institutions better use technology to support success and equity goals. We really further that mission in 3 different ways. We get to work with lovely organizations and initiatives like Complete College America and the Digital Learning Alliance. We also get to do work at a state level. And then we work a lot directly with institutions and cohorts of institutions to help with technology strategy, purchasing, and implementation support. And our namesake is an incredible woman named Ada Lovelace, who is in many cases regarded as the founder of scientific computing. And as an agenda for our time together, I mentioned up front, one of the things we're going to be talking a lot about today to kind of guide the question of what is the right student success technology is we're going to be going through a pretty rich body of data from students directly about what is an ideal student success in technology-enabled journey at our institutions. And then second from there, we're going to get into really discrete student feedback about specific technology categories. So what tools and technology practices matter most? We're going to look at tools like the learner management system, advising technologies, CRMs, chatbots, and so forth. And then at the very end, we're going to have a little bit of time for technology tool and vendor real talk. Before we started the webinar today, I was chatting with Melanie, and one of the things that we often find in webinars that we host with folks is that typically when folks show up for an ADA Center webinar, it's because there is a technology topic percolating. That is, gosh, my institution just bought this tool and it's really not going well. What should we do about it? Or gosh, my president is really excited and ambitious about the power of AI, and all of a sudden we have 60 technology products that our team doesn't have capacity to implement. How do we handle it? So I always like to save some time at the back end for some of those conversations. But let's dig in. And one of the things I like to do before starting these conversations, where I spend a lot of time talking about our insight and perspective, is just take a minute to humanize discussions about technology. So if you feel so inclined, no pressure, I know it's later in the day, if you want to pop in the chat, I have 2 prompts for you to mull on. So the first is, as we emerge from our more virtual reality, how, if at all, do you want to change your relationship with technology? And the second is, what's one thing you hope we talk about on this webinar today? I would be interested, and I'm sure the group would be interested in thoughts on both. As folks mull over some of those questions, I want to take a minute to talk about the methodology behind some of what you're going to be seeing here today. So over the course of this past spring, we had a chance to chat with students from 71 different institutions. They were a mix of public 4-year, private 4-year, and community college, really from all over the country. And we had a very specific focus on MSIs as well throughout the course of our work. The students we spoke to did skew male versus female. And we had an opportunity to also get many of the students that we spoke with that were interested to actually illustrate through art some of the concepts of what we're going to be talking about here today. So you'll see some student art that's bringing life to some of the feedback that we heard over the course of the last several months. And one of the ways that we go out in the field and gather this feedback is we actually compensate students for their time. So each of the students that we spoke with was given a $30 gift card in exchange for sharing stories with us about their experience using technology to engage with their institutions. And then I'd love to give some credit to the lovely folks on my team at the Ada Center who are really behind the student interviews that you're going to be hearing about today. And now we get to dig in to a student named Ling Yu. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes before we get into really discrete feedback on specific technology tools, talking a sort of a narrative arc about what students told us was their idealized experience facilitated through technology at their institution. And we're going to be doing that from the perspective of a hypothetical student named Ling Yu. So in this case, prospective student Ling Yu expresses interest in the college at a community event and tells the recruiter about his career interests and financial concerns. Ling Yu then receives a personalized letter encouraging his enrollment, a main point of contact at the college to help with onboarding questions, and a personalized task list of key steps. These steps are continually updated in his student onboarding portal, which he can regularly see which tasks he's completed. Ling Yu's onboarding navigator sends Ling Yu information about degree programs tailored to his career interests, along with financial aid information. When Ling Yu does not complete FAFSA, the navigator follows up. Ling Yu's student portal reflects this conversation and points him towards those FAFSA forms. Ling Yu enrolls at the college and meets with his advisor during his first semester to build a degree plan. Conversations with his onboarding navigator help guide that degree planning conversation. And his advisor also proactively suggests on-campus employment opportunities, which are already populating in Ling Yu's student portal. Ling Yu and his advisor would then be able to regularly view and edit his semester by semester degree plan, monitor his progress to degree, and collaborate on changes to his degree plan with a user-friendly, accurate system. Ling Yu receives consistent communication from the registrar's office, financial aid, advising, career services, and his faculty members about courses required for graduation and continuing education and career success. When Ling Yu deviates from his degree plan or wants to change majors, his advisor is alerted and can send outreach to Ling Yu and other students like him to inquire about the change of plans and make sure that Ling Yu is on track with his goals. And of course, on the back end, what's powering some of this is a holistic student support technology infrastructure that works as follows. Ling Yu's advisor and broader support team can personalize conversations with Ling Yu based on his interests and experiences. Advising appointments would no longer be consumed by his advisor navigating across multiple systems and screens trying to find key information. Ling Yu would only have to tell his story once. The college would support him even as he transitions across majors and moves across departments. And then on the back end, college leadership would be able to analyze the activities and experiences of students like Ling Yu to understand the interactions most closely tied to positive outcomes for different student populations. These analytics can also be used to guide personalized outreach and support to students like Ling Yu, such that Ling Yu and his peers don't fall through the cracks. And lastly, I want to talk through an example of sort of a hypothetical academic classroom scenario and how LMS and learning technologies plug into this. Ling Yu's professor would begin her biology course with an introduction to the LMS and remote lab tool, along with expectations for their use. Ling Yu's biology professor and writing instructor would have enabled use of the LMS calendar, assignments, and discussion boards, and they'd use them consistently. Ling Yu would also get a tutorial of the remote exam proctoring software before taking his calculus exam, so he would know what to expect. And then the student portal, LMS, and degree planning tool, and the student mobile app would all show consistent information across applications and devices. Ling Yu would be able to build his learning community and connect with his classmates through the college's interactive messaging tool. So of course, this is all a magic universe where our technology is working perfectly. And this is ideally what students told us they would love to experience. So again, I invite you, if you feel so inclined, to use the chat to share a little bit about what parts of Ling Yu's journey have been most challenging to achieve with technology. When we ask this question in in-person group settings, I will tell you that your peers often list a couple things. They talk about the challenges of degree planning technology, making sure that the data from the degree audit has integrity, especially as it's ported oftentimes into sort of a third-party degree planning tool. That's one pain point. Another pain point is stitching together all those different student interaction technologies. So tools, for example, like tutor track being used in tutoring, advising software like EAB, student conduct software like Maxian, right? All of these different technology tools that tend to hold student notes and information. How can we stitch that together to give students a cohesive experience? And in particular, how can we knit together data that we collect about students while they're still prospects with data about them as they become enrolled students and they get a student ID? Those are some of the pain points that your colleagues often share with us. Oh, and we have, Melanie, I don't know if there's any fixing this, but we do have a comment that the chat seems like it's disabled, which may be why we're not getting commentary in the chat. If there's anything we can do about that, that's great. If not, we'll just make sure to open it up for questions as we go along. And now moving along, and please do feel free to raise questions in the chat or Q&A, whatever works best. And Melanie, please feel free to interrupt me at any point in time if I'm going along and folks have questions. It is a smaller group today, and I'd love to be able to open up the floor to more interactive dialogue. Otherwise, it's going to be a fair bit of talking on my part, and I really do want to hear your questions. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand or reach out in some capacity. What I have here in front of you today looks a lot like Tetris of yesteryear, but is a way that I want to organize some of the student feedback I'm about to share with you moving forward. So we talked sort of pie in the sky, ideally, what would a technology facilitated student experience look like? But the topic of the webinar today is how do we choose the right student success technology? I think a prerequisite to that question is really defining what do we even mean by student success technology? It's a topic I could certainly wax poetic on, but for the purposes of today, we're going to be really comprehensive. And so what you see here is really our visualization of a typical student success technology tech stack that errs on the side of being very liberal with that term. And I'm going to give you a quick orientation to it, and then we're going to dig into different pieces of it. So at the very bottom where it says core systems, what we think really undergirds any student success technology infrastructure is, of course, your student information system, your ERP. So that's going to be Banner, PeopleSoft. For the brave of you among us, Workday, right? That's going to be your core set of systems. You know, and all of you at this point also tend to have a degree audit, which houses your degree rules. Alongside those core systems, there are two pretty critical tools. One is your learner management system. So this is Canvas, Blackboard, and then not all institutions have this technology, but we also consider it to be a core tool, which is really your curriculum management system. This is where course data and degree rules are formed, sort of the genesis of these. Sitting on top of these core systems, we have prospect management tools. So these are enrollment management systems. An example here would be Slate. And then we have all sorts of third-party applications that connect to these, everything from application processing to event management, chat, and so forth. And then if you move over there to the right where it says enrolled student advising and support tools, there's probably, you know, at many institutions, 40 technologies that sit in this area of really what we would tend to think of as case management systems that interact with student profile data in a more user-friendly way, monitor student activities, help with student communication, and are a place for faculty and staff to take notes. And then on top of this, of course, sits a whole variety of capabilities, everything from academic planning, student scheduling, analytics, and early alert capabilities. So that's some of the nomenclature I'm going to use as we go through this conversation. For those of you who are less familiar on the IT side, please use whatever terms make sense to you. I tend to find this visual can be helpful as we get into some of the feedback. All right, let's move into it. Let's talk a little bit about student feedback on learner management systems or learning management systems. So before the pandemic, I think the LMS, of course, was becoming a really indispensable technology tool, but we heard from students in the last several months that now it's a true virtual classroom and hub of all things digital learning. We heard that students from Gen Z feel like they can't imagine life without it because to them, higher education has really never existed without the LMS. And then older students really view it as the outlook of college, right? So as a way to kind of organize their life, especially when we think about returning adults that are coming out of the workforce. I'm not going to go through and read every single student quote on each of these pages. Melanie's going to share this deck after this conversation today, but I am going to pick out some interesting themes that I think are worth noting. So over there on the left, we heard students remark things such as, I'm a fan of calendars and reminders, though I like them to all be in one place. The LMS feels like my personalized starting hub where I'm organized and get my work done. So students really felt like it was the place. If you need to capture their attention, the LMS is how you should do it. In the middle column, one of the things I found really interesting is that 60% of students told us that these days they're actually selecting courses based on faculty LMS usage. That is, students are asking their peers, does this faculty member do more than simply post the syllabus? Is this a faculty member that's actively posting interim grades, participating in the discussion boards and so forth? And some students told us that they would actively drop classes. If they signed up for a class and found that their faculty member wasn't using the LMS, they would say, sorry, no thanks, and find a different option. And as you might imagine, part of when we talk about technology, it's not simply, okay, what's the best technology tool? Like what's better, Canvas or Blackboard? It's also, of course, about our practices for how we use the technology on the people and process side of things. And students told us that there's a lot of room for improvement there. Some students shared things like, there's a few faculty members that don't update the calendar feature in the LMS, so it's out of sync with the assignment tab. And that has real ramifications. In this case, a student shared, this is the only time I've missed an assignment and it actually led me to drop out of classes I needed for my major. Or you get nervous using new things on the LMS unless your instructor says to do it. If they give you a green light, then it becomes easier. If they don't tell you, you get more nervous and don't use it, even if it helps your learning. So moving on from learning management systems, we're going to go through some of these categories at a reasonable clip so we have time for discussion. So again, please let me know if you'd like me to slow down and talk more about any one of these areas. I want to talk a little about chatbots. This is really a technology category that's emerged more strongly in higher ed in the last couple of years and has become a pretty useful student success technology tool. So if you've been on the fence about chatbots, students largely give them thumbs up as long as they are trained properly. Here's what students had to say. One student shared, every time I log into my LMS, my school chatbot helps me in keeping track of my assignments continuously. It's a great way to double check my progress. Another shared, my school chatbot noticed that I started turning in assignments late and suggested that I meet with a tutor if I'm having trouble. That was really amazing. I would not have connected with a tutor otherwise. And then under resources for navigating simple life questions, students especially appreciated chatbots that could help them navigate college resources and find information more quickly on sort of a 24/7 capacity. So my chatbot helps eliminate time-consuming tasks like looking up our registration deadlines. Or there were so many complaints before about wrong school fees charged at our school. Our chatbot lets us easily access our account and view them. Or our chatbot gives us basic info on things like appointments, facilities, and so forth. It's a great way to get all of our info in one spot. And interestingly, one of the things that students told us about chatbots and one of the reasons they liked them, I was surprised students noticed this, is they felt like it was a good investment for the institution. So students told us, hey, like once you get this technology up and running, it's so great for me to be able to have this type of resource on demand when I want it. And it's an alternative to our school going out and sort of hiring the personnel to be able to field these really basic questions. And students felt like they were very happy to spend their IT school fees if it contributed to a technology like this, which I found to be pretty interesting. Now let's talk a little bit about student feedback on degree planning tools. Students spent a lot of time lavishing praise on the concept of degree planning tools. They even remarked that in some cases, if their institution was using one, that the interface and display was really graphically pleasing. It had all the right capabilities. But unfortunately, students shared a lot of stories with us about faulty underlying data. The worst was when I was trying to make a transfer to another school. The data was totally wrong, as the prereqs for the Cal State system had completely changed twice in 1 year. I now spend 2 hours each month making sure I'm signed up for the right classes. Or the off-track indicator keeps going off in my degree planner, even though I'm taking and passing all the classes my advisor recommended. I can't get it to turn off. This makes me so nervous. I started taking Lexapro, which is an antidepressant. Or another student shared, I can't actually look up what classes I should take in my degree planner if it's during the summer. For some reason, the degree planner only shows courses in the spring and fall. Students also told us that one of the things that was really challenging for them about the degree planning system in use by their school was that there were often mixed messages from the degree planner and other sources of information. So for example, I was mainly relying on my degree planning tool for transferring, but then my EOPS counselor told me it was out of date and not to use it. Now I'm confused about which classes count and which ones were a waste of time. Or I thought all I had to do was follow the suggestions made by our degree planner in order to graduate. My advisor thinks I'd be better off taking some more advanced classes given how good my grades have been. Why should I work even harder when the degree planner says I don't have to? And then we had one student share some extremely harsh feedback about the degree planner. All of which to say, our big takeaway from student conversations is as important as it is to support students in degree planning. We heard so many stories of really challenged degree planning experiences by students. Our view is that if your institution cannot implement these tools with integrity, which takes a lot of time because degree rule data is messy, it is not the right student success technology for your institution at this exact moment in time. I'm happy to chat a bit more about that later. Let's talk a little bit about enrollment tools, which is a really vast category that I'm hoping to distill a little bit for this discussion. So this is an area, maybe another word for enrollment management tools. We struggle a bit with using this term, but I'm going to just toss it out there. Sort of CRM or prospect CRM is another way that you might be thinking of this category of technology. And up until quite recently, a lot of institutions that we had seen across the field had really invested very little in high quality enrollment management technology, right? Like they hadn't made the decision to buy a more robust tool like a Slate or a Salesforce, and had instead been scraping by with sort of an Ellucian module or a more inexpensive technology here. And what students did tell us is that this is a category of technology that is really important to not only their success, but their decision to enroll at your institution. This is what students said. Students asked for technology-driven spam just this once. We received an enrollment deadline email 2 weeks ahead of the deadline, then 3 days ahead of the deadline. I needed those reminders because I was juggling work and school. Normally I hate spam, but for something like enrollment, I want to get those texts and reminders so I can submit my forms and get the classes I need. Super helpful. I thought I'd sent in all my enrollment information, but it turned out I forgot to complete my financial background info. I never checked my email, but a text I got from the school was what got me to finish it up. And students love the personalization component of these tools. So my school's new student emails had a summary of the conversations I'd had along with my interests. That was great. I didn't feel like I was getting spammed to enroll and pay them money. When I indicated on my application form that I was an older student, my school started sending me resources about computer and video conferencing training specifically for older enrolled students. I loved that. Or I picked this college because it felt like they knew me, even though I may have been more comfortable at an HBCU. The one thing I would note here is that in order for these capabilities to really come to life, the underlying IT capacity becomes important because it enables you to set up these systems in such a way where students are getting real-time updates as they go through various onboarding milestones. For example, at first, when I completed my FAFSA, it felt like I was sending my information into a black hole. Thankfully, almost all my enrollment emails said the school received my FAFSA info and on what date. Those little notes helped make things feel like I was on track for my financial aid. Another student shared, after I sent in my transcript, the school's reminder emails included information on the classes I should take my first semester. That was great. It helped me start thinking about what life would be like as a student. Great. Let's talk a little about student feedback on student alert and communication tools. We certainly heard a smattering of success stories here. Students shared feedback like, our syllabus had one set of due dates, but our professor said another, so my first few assignments were late. A warning from my professor helped me realize what the problem was and got me back on track. Or I kept missing classes because my internet connection at home was so bad. I checked my email and got a warning, so I decided to get some new equipment from my school to fix my problem in order to avoid a bad grade. I was really struggling in my math class, but I thought that was normal. Who gets it right the first few times? An alert from my instructor had some information on tutoring, which gave me the help that I needed. But a lot of students we talked to reported really low adoption. They said things like, I received an alert once when I was a freshman, but not after that. I was under the impression that I'd be getting them more. Seems a bit odd to me. Or alerts. I get a few of those from my trio counselor. They usually have info about news I might have missed. I've never gotten one from an instructor though. Or my professors are really great about picking up the phone and calling us if there's a problem, like if I missed a quiz. Email is a different story. They don't really communicate with us in an online way. So for those of you who are wondering, okay, how do I contextualize the student feedback to tools that I have in the back end? What you're sort of hearing in these comments from students is what would appear to students if your school was using a tool like an EAB or an anthology or what was formerly Starfish, right? And what we heard across the board is that students actually really liked the feedback from these tools. It just, they weren't being used at the rate that we would hope. And there were quite a few missed opportunities along with them. So for example, all of the important messages from my school were going to my inbox where I add and drop classes, not where I actually do my assignments. I wish everything was just in my LMS or Gmail. Or I have no choice on how important communications are being sent to me. What works for me might not work for another student. Or my friends are always the first ones to let me know of a big class or school change, like a closure for COVID. The school's notice always comes a bit later. And here's some feedback we got from students on a couple of different critical technology categories like course registration, the student portal, and the institution website. We could spend a lot of time talking about each of these technology categories, but we sort of consolidated this feedback on one page because there's a pretty clear punchline for each of them. What students told us wasn't entirely surprising, which was that your website plays a major role in student success. I'm going to spend a minute talking about that versus reading all the student feedback here. So in an ideal world, we often get asked, who should the website be optimized for? It's really difficult to structure your website in such a way where everyone gets what they need from it. And in a really ideal world, your college website should be very much optimized for prospective students. Because once a student enrolls, of course, they should be using your student portal, and that should really be the way that they're interfacing with the institution. The reality is that, unfortunately, in many cases, our websites are a lot easier for students to navigate than our portals, and also students get really used to the website. And so even once they become enrolled students, they still rely on it for everything. And so what we hear from students is that the ease of ability to find key information on your website is a tremendous factor in student success and ability to access resources and select classes and make decisions about careers and majors. So if you're thinking about spending money on a website redesign, it's probably a good place to allocate resources. And as part of that, one of the things students told us is that their course scheduling features left something to be desired. So course scheduling tools were an area where students really felt like those technologies were missing key data. For example, students shared things like, if there's no information on where a class is being held, then I won't consider registering for it. How could I ever register and build out a schedule without that information? Or, I've been a remote student since COVID began and enjoy being one. However, I still don't understand why our school can't label class styles. I'm tired of dropping a class after finding out that in-person attendance is required. Or another student shared, why can't I find information on whether a class is pre-recorded? I can only balance work and school if I know which classes are being held live or not. And sometimes classes jump between being live and recorded, which stresses me out. And then lastly, as I mentioned, ideally we want to be encouraging students that are enrolled to really use the student portal as an interface for all things at your institution. And students told us that a lot of times the organization of these was a bit clunky. So for example, a student shared, I feel like a lot of important information is just buried in the student portal. Why do I have to click on more than announcements to find out that the library is closed? Or the student portal looks like a zoomed in website on my phone. It doesn't work at all, which is a shame because that's how I access lectures. How is this possible? And we received a fair bit of colorful feedback on portals from most of the 100+ students that we spoke with. So again, that would be an area that might be worth spending some time. Student feedback on career counseling tools. I'm going to summarize this at a high level because the feedback was very consistent. Students shared with us that in general, their main challenge with career counseling tools is that they didn't even know that their institution had them. So they couldn't find them and they didn't feel like they existed. And then those students that were able to find them felt like a lot of the tools lacked the robustness to compete with public job boards. But all students we spoke to felt like career counseling tools were a very, very high need and something that they wish their institution would spend more time speaking about and really talking about. So under can't find existing tools, we heard feedback like, I only heard about Handshake because when I got here, I was nervous and tried to click on every link. When I got to Handshake, it didn't look good, but I realized it had a lot of really great information. And then another piece of feedback from a student. I'm not sure why our career website doesn't exist in our LMS. To access ours, you have to log into a special section of the school website. Couldn't they just build in a hyperlink somewhere in our LMS and make it easier? Or I just recently found out our school has tools to help find jobs. This should be included in orientation or at least mid-semester. And that was a piece of feedback we heard a lot. I mean, to be really frank, I think probably every single institution that's represented on this webinar today does speak about their career counseling tools in orientation. It's just that, of course, we're giving students so much information during orientation that it washes over them. And so a big takeaway for us is that we need to be even more cognizant of reminding students about the tools that we have at our disposal. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about student feedback on advising technologies. I'm going to use this word to mean a very broad range of capabilities, everything from advising appointment scheduling to queuing systems with student support offices, and just highlight some of the key things that we heard from students. We heard sort of a tale of two stories from many students who share that some institutions have really doubled down on advising technology over the last couple of years, and some are still kind of struggling to meet students where they are. So for example, some students shared with us, connecting with your advisor is super easy at our school. You can choose to connect a couple different ways. At first, I connected with my advisor over phone calls, then we transitioned to emails and video conferencing, and my advisor was super quick to respond. Or another student shared, now that we have video conferencing options, it would be nice if advisors were available in the evening, since I work all day and mainly take night classes. I don't have the type of job where I can just take a break for an appointment. My friends at more tech-savvy schools seem to have that type of help. And then students give us some feedback about the types of modalities that are useful for advising conversations. And then what we heard from students, I know is something all of us have been grappling with as we have less IT staff to support some of our ambitious goals, but a lot of students commented on some of the challenges with being able to make online appointments or speaking with a financial aid counselor virtually, or servers regularly being down and so forth, or just calendar syncing issues with reminders for online appointments and so forth. So again, some of these bread and butter tools are things that students really flagged for us as still lacking and would be areas of potential investment. Oof, okay. That was a lot of text, a lot of feedback. We're definitely going to send around the deck so folks can look at it and share it with others that might be interested. We heard a couple of more aspirational bits of feedback from students about future technology opportunities. And then from there, I'm going to hit pause and open it up to questions and comments. So a couple of things students flagged for us. Students told us that in many cases, college-sanctioned ed tech tools have continued to be a bit outdated and underdeveloped, specifically student communication tools. So several students shared, we use tools that feel more like our generation, like WhatsApp, to keep in touch with each other about classes. The discussion tab on the LMS is fine, but it doesn't notify me about new posts the way that WhatsApp does. We always, hear students talking about how Google Meets is a great way to connect with classmates, or Slack and Discord. So a lot of these channels become these informal communication mechanisms between students, and in some cases, students and faculty. So one of the things that we're kind of keeping tabs on at the ADA Center and starting to see unfold is that there's all these digital interactions that are occurring outside of college-sanctioned tools, which has some challenges from sort of a data perspective and student privacy and so forth. This was something we've heard in larger quantities and volumes than we have in the past, and is worth thinking about as we think about the types of student communication tools that we might want to invest in our institutions moving forward. One of the really interesting takeaways that has some technology ramifications that I was really intrigued by in these student interviews was that about half the students that we spoke to discussed that over the course of the pandemic, there ended up becoming a organic role that emerged in many cases, which was that of a class representative. So students amongst themselves would essentially nominate a single individual to be the conduit between a faculty member's perspectives, wishes, assignments, things on the horizon, and the rest of the class. So a class representative might, text everyone, use Slack, use Discord to communicate with students in the class about important things on the horizon, which I found pretty interesting. So just food for thought as we think about, the future of student communication tools. I thought these feedback areas were pretty interesting.